It was supposed to be their dream home. In 2014, Derek and Maria bought a 6-bedroom house on 657 Boulevard in the quiet, affluent town of Westfield, New Jersey. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, friendly neighbors. Everything about the place seemed perfect for their growing family. They were only weeks away from moving in when the first letter arrived. It came in a plain white envelope, addressed simply to the new owner. No return address. Inside was a typed note that began politely enough. Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. But as Derek read on, the letter shifted from welcoming to deeply disturbing. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s. My father watched in the 1960s. And now it is my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? The writer signed off as the Watcher. Derek stood there in silence. At first, he thought it was a prank, maybe some neighbor's idea of dark humor. But there was something about the tone, the way the letter described his children by their nicknames, details that no one outside the family could know, that froze the blood in his veins. He called the police. The officer who responded told him to hold off on telling the neighbors. After all, the letter could have come from anyone. But then came the second letter. This one was angrier. The Watcher wrote that the family hadn't moved in fast enough, and that the house was crying from all the time spent empty. Have they found what is in the walls yet? The letter asked. Why are you here? I am put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. The family hadn't even unpacked their boxes, and already the home felt poisoned. Maria found herself watching the windows, wondering who was looking back. Was it the couple next door who'd lived there for decades? The retired man across the street who always seemed to linger by his mailbox? They installed cameras, hired private investigators, even reached out to a former FBI agent to analyze the handwriting. Nothing helped. The letters kept coming. One asked if the children were playing in the basement yet, then added, if I were them, I wouldn't go down there alone. You'll never hear them if they scream. Derek and Maria's dream home turned into a waking nightmare. They tried to sell it, but who would buy a house with a stalker attached to it? The neighborhood turned on them. Some believed the letters were a hoax, maybe a ploy for attention or financial gain. Others whispered that the Watcher was a neighbor who wanted the house for themselves. The family eventually decided not to move in at all. They rented the house out, but even tenants received letters, shorter, stranger, angrier. Despite multiple investigations, DNA testing, and even a Netflix adaptation years later, the Watcher was never found. The identity of the letter writer remains one of New Jersey's most haunting mysteries. But what unsettled investigators most were the details. Things about the house only someone inside could know. The exact layout of rooms. The sound the pipes made at night. To this day, residents say 657 Boulevard still carries a strange energy. Some claim the house seems alive. Lights flickering when you talk about the letters, doors closing on their own, the feeling of being watched from just beyond the walls. No one knows whether the Watcher was a disturbed neighbor, a former resident, or something older, something bound to the house itself. The final letter the Broaddus family received was short. Just one line. You are afraid to move into 657 Boulevard. It cries for its young blood, and it will get it one way or another. They never went back, and the Watcher, whoever or whatever they were, was never seen again. It began with small things. A missing sandwich, a half-empty carton of milk that no one remembered drinking, a single light left on in the middle of the night. Emma and David, a young couple from Colorado, chalked it up to forgetfulness. They'd just moved into an older home, the kind that creaked with every gust of wind. They were busy, tired, adjusting. But then came the noises. Soft, rhythmic sounds above the ceiling. Footsteps. At first, it was faint, like the occasional thud of settling beams. But soon it became undeniable. Slow, deliberate steps pacing across the attic. David tried to brush it off. Probably squirrels, he said. Old insulation, raccoons, who knows? Still, the noises grew louder, sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning. One night, Emma swore she heard someone whisper her name. The next morning, she found the attic door cracked open. It was an old pull-down hatch with a metal cord. Neither of them had opened it since they moved in. When David climbed up with a flashlight, the beam swept over dust and boxes, but something was wrong. There were footprints in the dust. Bare footprints. They started locking every door and window at night. But the sense of being watched never left. Emma began to hear faint movements even during the day, floorboards creaking when David was at work, shadows shifting in her peripheral vision. One afternoon, she came home early. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She walked down the hallway toward the bedroom and froze. Her clothes were scattered across the bed. Someone had gone through her drawers. The police came, searched the house, and found no sign of forced entry. They suggested it could have been a friend or relative with a spare key. But Emma knew that wasn't true. No one else had a key. 2 nights later, David woke up to a faint scraping sound above their bed. He climbed up into the attic again, determined to find the source. And this time, he found something. In one corner, behind a stack of old insulation, was a small hollowed-out space. Inside it, a sleeping bag, a half-eaten bag of chips, and a notebook. The first few pages were filled with scribbles. Then, words. I see you when you sleep. You look different when you're angry. The attic is safe. They don't know I'm here. Police later determined that someone, possibly a transient man who had escaped from a nearby halfway house, had been living in their attic for at least 3 weeks. They arrested him that night after finding him hiding in a crawl space above the kitchen. But that's not where the story ends. Because after he was gone, Emma and David still heard footsteps. Weeks later, another sound began, a soft knocking from inside the walls, always near the bedroom, always around 3 a.m. They had the house inspected again. The contractor found no one, just old wooden framing and wiring. But when he pried open a section of drywall where the knocking was loudest, he found something wedged inside. A Polaroid photo. It showed Emma and David asleep in their bed, taken from above. The picture was old, edges yellowed, the date faded. The couple had only lived there 6 months. When they showed the photo to police, they couldn't trace it. To this day, no one knows who took it. Emma swears she hears footsteps every winter when the air turns dry and the wood begins to settle. David says it's just the house. But sometimes, late at night, she lies awake listening. The same slow, deliberate pacing above her ceiling. And she wonders, maybe the man they caught wasn't the first. Or maybe he was never really gone. In 2019, a college senior named Rachel moved into an old 2-story rental house near Dayton, Ohio. She'd found it through an online sublet listing. Cheap, close to campus, fully furnished. The previous tenant had left in a hurry, according to the landlord, but everything seemed fine. The house was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. Rachel lived alone, and after years of dorm life, the silence was comforting at first. But within a week, small things began to unsettle her. A door she was sure she'd locked would be found slightly open. Her bathroom mirror would fog up at night even when she hadn't showered. And sometimes, when she came home from class, she swore she smelled cigarette smoke. Faint, stale, hanging in the air like an echo of someone else's life. One night, Rachel woke up to the sound of running water. She crept out of bed, heart pounding, and found the kitchen faucet on full blast. She shut it off, too afraid to investigate further. The next morning, she convinced herself she must have left it on. Weeks passed. The strange occurrences continued. She noticed that food disappeared. A sandwich, a banana, a bottle of orange juice. Always small things, easy to overlook. Then one evening, as she studied in her living room, she heard a soft thud from below, from the basement. The door to the basement was always locked. The landlord had told her it was used for storage, nothing else. But the noise came again, a steady, muffled rhythm, like footsteps. Rachel grabbed a flashlight and unlocked the door. The basement was dark and cold, lined with exposed brick and old pipes. Nothing seemed out of place, until she noticed a large plastic sheet hanging at the far end, concealing a section of the wall. When she pulled it aside, she saw a door. It wasn't on the blueprint the landlord had shown her. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle. It was locked, but the lock was on her side. She turned it slowly. Inside was a narrow corridor, barely wide enough for one person. The air smelled damp, metallic. At the end of the corridor was a small room, windowless, but lived in. A mattress on the floor, a radio, empty food wrappers, and a small desk covered with papers, sketches of Rachel's house from different angles, and photos of her, sleeping, cooking, sitting at her desk, all taken from somewhere inside the house. Rachel ran. She called the police, shaking so hard she could barely speak. When they arrived, they searched the crawl space and found evidence of a hidden tenant, a man who had apparently been living beneath the house for months, possibly since before she moved in. They found traces of his presence everywhere: cigarette butts, shoe prints, a pair of glasses, a single tooth. But no sign of the man himself. The landlord swore he had no idea. The police checked nearby shelters, hospitals, and missing persons lists, but the man was never identified. Rachel moved out immediately, leaving everything behind. The property was later inspected again by new owners who planned to renovate it. They found something in the wall near the basement, a note written in pencil on old wood. "Don't rent this place. He's still here." There was no signature. Some of the construction workers said they heard movement downstairs during the renovation, like shuffling, whispering. One quit after finding cigarette smoke hanging in the air of the empty basement. The house still stands today. No one's lived there long. Neighbors say lights turn on by themselves, and sometimes they see a faint figure standing in the window late at night. Maybe it's a squatter. Maybe it's just an old house full of stories. Or maybe Rachel wasn't the only one who ever found the hidden room. Maybe she was just the first to leave it alive.